Hello everyone. This week's chapter is entitled Training Mules. Jack will be talking about how he got mules, why he got mules, and give us a few training tips. Stick around to the end and I will also insert a video of Jack with one of the mules he currently has, and he talks about it a little bit. So I hope you enjoy that also at the end of the chapter. Let's get started. I have always been intrigued with the rugged, remote backcountry where there aren't any other hunters. With less hunting pressure, the animals in these areas live longer, so there are more trophy animals. Besides being more trophies, the animals aren't as wild as other game that are frequently hunted, which makes it easier to see more animals. But the biggest reason I hunt the backcountry is that the hunt has a different feel if the area isn't crowded with other hunters. For lack of a better word, I call this romance. If my enjoyment from hunting were measured by animals taken in the field, most of my hunts would not have been much fun. But I don't measure my success by animals taken. I measure it from the enjoyment I get because of romancing the land beyond all roads. Of course, to romance this rugged country, you must deal with the reasons that you're the only one hunting the area. These reasons vary, depending on what country you're hunting, but the hike in and out is always an issue. One of the biggest problems hunters face is that it's not feasible to pack an elk out on your back if you're in the distance it takes to get away from the other hunters. My hunting partner Wayne and I both had horses, so we knew it helps. But it takes more than distance to find a piece of the backcountry no one else is hunting. To get away from hunting pressure, the country must also be rugged enough to discourage people from using horses. Back then, Wayne and I decided the best way to deal with this problem was to start using mules to pack out our meat. We later found this was not only expensive, but also a long way from an easy solution. But we still thought it would be worth the trouble. Of course, the first thing we had to do was buy some mules, which turned out to be a life-changing experience for both of us. After traveling all over the Northwest, we still couldn't find one mule we wanted to buy. Wayne and I were not expecting to buy an animal that we would use in a parade, but were hoping to find one that looked somewhat like a horse. I was not prepared for how ugly these mules were. Some of these animals had a head 3 feet long with the chest only 10 inches wide. I have found it interesting. Some people don't care what a mule looks like. I guess they believe mules are supposed to be ugly. I find this to be disgraceful to the species. There are a lot of mules on this planet that, even with their oversized ears, are still beautiful. Fortunately, we met a crusty old mule man who, instead of trying to sell us his mules, told us we were not going to find what we wanted in Montana. Boys, because mules are half donkeys, the ones that look like a horse are freaks. It's a lot harder to make a good mule than to make a good horse. Then he went on to explain, unless the owner dies, in the Northwest people don't sell a nice-looking, well-broke mule. For the kind of mules you're wanting, you need to be looking in Tennessee and Missouri, not Montana. After hearing this, we talked to some of our outfitter friends and discovered how they got their mules. They would go to big mule sales and bring back semi-truckloads of mules, keeping the ones they wanted and selling the ones they didn't want to people like us. We also found out the only sale left that year was in Columbus, Tennessee. Wayne and I were not going to let a little thing like 2,500 miles away discourage us. Not having the money to lease a semi-truck and trailer wasn't going to stop us either, because we did have a 24-foot gooseneck horse trailer and a truck to pull it. But it'll help you appreciate this story if you understand. Our trailer was no ordinary fifth-wheel horse trailer. This trailer was special. It was built in the Libby High School shop class by the students. Because we didn't have the money to buy a horse trailer, Wayne and I made an agreement with the shop teacher. We would create a shop project for the students, and we would buy all the materials if they would help us build a trailer. As you would guess, this trailer wasn't the sleek, metal-sided horse trailer that the common folk have. For siding, Wayne and I put up sheets of plywood and painted them black. Another upgrade our trailer had was that it was twice as heavy as commercial-built horse trailers. Besides being fortunate enough to own this trailer to pull it, we were lucky enough to have one of the first pickups ever made with a diesel engine. The first diesel pickups had some serious issues. The biggest one was lacking power. Wayne and I didn't think much about it until we got into the windy country of eastern Montana. Because of our gutless pickup, the trailer being so heavy, bad aerodynamics, and a strong headwind, our top speed was 40 miles an hour. This was very frustrating to Wayne. "Jack, I think we should turn around. At this speed, we'll never make it to Columbus in time for the sale." I wasn't wanting to give up, telling him, "Don't worry, from here on, it's downhill all the way to Columbus, and the wind is bound to quit sometime." I was right. 800 miles later, the wind died down. Trying to make it to the sale in time, our diesel truck never stopped moving except when we had to fuel up. Then we would trade off drivers and take turns sleeping in the back seat. When we finally parked our trailer at the Columbus Fairgrounds, we were a little late to the sale, but not enough to matter. Felt like we were in a fairy tale world with all the horses and mules. The auction was more like a huge celebration than the business of selling hundreds of animals. It didn't take long for everyone to find out we had come all the way from Montana, and we were the ones who owned the trailer that looked like a gigantic black shoebox on wheels. We also attracted attention because of the money we were spending. That winter, I had been supplementing my income from selling real estate by trapping and had $9,700 cash in my pocket. That doesn't seem like a lot now, but in the early 70s, it was more money than most people would spend on a mule. Besides, Wayne was even willing to spend considerably more money than I was. It would take too many words to tell you how much we learned about mules at that sale. Probably the most important was that there's a big difference in the price of a good-looking, well-trained mule than an unbroke, ugly mule. We could buy animals there for less than $300 that people in Montana were trying to sell us for thousands of dollars. Even more surprising was that one mule sold for $11,200. But the grandest part of the sale was the people. We bought 14 mules from a dozen different owners. Not one took advantage of our inexperience. One old gentleman we got to know told us, "We just didn't think it would be sporty to take advantage of the two young cowboys from Montana who couldn't even afford a horse trailer." Like others at the sale, he also told us we should buy young, unbroke mules because we could buy better-looking mules at the quarter of the price. I asked Wayne whether he thought this was a good idea, and did he think they were trying to take advantage of us. "Jack, they think we're cowboys, and I'm not going to tell them we aren't. Besides, I'm not afraid. We have broken plenty of horses. How much harder can it be to break a mule?" It didn't take long for us to find out. We were convinced we knew more about mules than most people, so we didn't buy even one well-trained mule. Later, we found out the real learning curve wouldn't happen until we started trying to break the 14 mules. And there's a lot more to know about mules than we learned at the sale. Like Wayne, I had trained horses before, but never by myself. My dad always helped me. Dad grew up on a ranch, and in those days horses were sometimes used for logging as well as ranch work. For generations, my family were horse people, but not mule people. I can remember my dad saying that his mom had been soured on mules and would not let a mule on the place. My father didn't always physically help me, but he was always there for advice on every horse I trained. But he knew nothing of mules, so the advice he gave me usually was anything but helpful. The first problem I had to deal with was that some of these mules would take off running when I tried to lead them. Any horse trainer knows if you're going to break stock from doing this, you can't let them pull the rope out of your hands. Out of your hands. This turned out to be my biggest issue training these mules because some of them learned to be incredibly good at this game and seemed to enjoy it. It didn't take me long to find out that it was much harder to fix this problem with a mule than a horse. If you have a lead rope attached to a horse's halter and dig your heels deep into the dirt, when they're pulling back, they don't have strong enough necks to turn their heads, so all they can do is back up. My dad was always encouraging, telling me, "Son, you're not holding the rope behind your ass the way you should," or "You're not digging your heels into the dirt enough." Partly because of what my dad was telling me, but mostly because I didn't want the mules to beat me at this game. It was a daily thing for me to be dragged around the horse pasture. I can't tell you how many times I had to clean the horse shit out of my ears and underwear before I realized the mules were stronger than the horse and me. But my persistence did work to some degree. After the mules found out that goofy guy wouldn't let go of the lead rope, all the mules, except the one I called Jake, decided it was more work than fun to drag me. I didn't blame my mule Jake for pulling back. It wasn't his fault. He wasn't born with this bad habit. I blamed his previous owner. I finally realized if I wanted to win this game with Jake, I was going to have to change the rules. I came up with the idea of tying the mule's lead rope to the saddle horn of a husky quarter-horse mare I called Lady. The mules seemed to like this mare, so I was hoping they would just naturally want to follow her. And if they didn't, I was thinking that because Lady outweighed them, she should be able to pull them behind her. All of them wanted to follow her and didn't even pull back, except Jake. Before I could get the rope untied, he dragged Lady backwards all the way across the pasture, which frightened the poor mare. The next thing I tried was tying a lead rope from Jake's halter to a tree. But this didn't work either. When he pulled the rope out of my hands, he hit the end of the rope with such force the halter broke. This caused the rope to come back at me. The heavy buckle on the halter glanced off the left side of my head. The doctor at the emergency room said if the buckle had hit me in the middle of my head, it probably would have killed me. I still ended up with a concussion, 36 stitches, and a scar on the side of my head that I will have forever. After I no longer got sick to my stomach from the concussion, I came up with another idea. I tied the mule to the back of my dad's pickup. Then, sitting on the tailgate, I would act like I was leading him. It was in the spring of the year, which made the pasture ground soft enough that Jake would lock up all 4 of his feet and let the pickup drag him. Frustrated, I told my dad to speed up and make some sharp turns, thinking that this would make Jake pick up his feet. It didn't. Not even on the turns. I couldn't help laughing when Dad would make a sharp turn. Jake, sitting back on his ass, would swing out long side of the truck like a water skier or a wakeboarder. Jake thought this was great sport. And if I left my dad's truck in the pasture, he would walk up to the tailgate, waiting to be tied up and wanting to be pulled around in the mud again. I quickly tired of this game. He obviously wasn't learning to lead from it. Every day, Dad and Wayne would try to convince me to get rid of Jake. They started calling him Alpo, after the brand of dog food. At the time, the price that mules and horses would bring at the canneries were higher than they had ever been. We all knew if this mule couldn't be broke to lead, even if I sold him to someone else, he would eventually end up dog food. I liked this mule a lot, and I didn't want this to happen. I found it interesting that Jake liked me, too. He would always walk up to me, making him easy to catch and put a halter on. But as soon as I attached a lead rope to his halter, he would take off running. It was fascinating to me that Jake never caused me any trouble when I was on his back. Besides this, he had the smoothest gait of any of the mules and the agility of a cat. At this time, I owned a portable stock rack made out of pipe that fit in the bed of a pickup that I used to haul stock. If I opened the gate of the stock rack, Jake would jump up into the back of the pickup. Seeing a 16-hand tall animal jump from flat ground through the gate of my stock rack into the back of a pickup was amazing. It was even more amazing to me that he was intelligent enough to get bored in a pasture, which was why he loved to go on rides and be pulled around in the mud. What I liked best about him was it didn't matter how long or steep a ride I took him on, he never got tired. I was convinced he would run any horse into the ground and had dreams of competing in endurance races with Jake. Even with all his good points, I knew there was something to what Dad and Wayne were saying about Jake, but I still wasn't ready to give up on him, not even when I ended up in the emergency room the next time. This happened when I was trying to put medicine on a cut Jake had on his forehead. He kept jerking his head away from me, so I cross-tied him to the tailgate of Dad's truck. Since he couldn't jerk his head anymore with his hind foot, he started kicking the dobbler I was using out of my hand. Every time I took my eyes off his hind foot, he would kick my hand so quickly that I couldn't do anything about it. This not only hurt, it made me mad. "Stop being so ornery, Jake," I yelled as I slapped him on the neck. Evidently, Jake decided it was his turn to get mad, because then he kicked me in the ribs with his hind foot with enough force that it lifted me up over the tailgate and into the back of the truck. The second time at the emergency room, things started to get a little embarrassing for me. It didn't help that I had the same doctor, and that I knew him because I'd sold him a house. Like me, he also owned horses. "Jack, I'm just curious. Is this the same mule that put you in here last time?" He kept looking at my chart and seemed puzzled. "It says here you were kicked by a mule. I understand how that would cause the bruising on your rib cage. You'll have to have an x-ray so we can tell if any ribs are broken. But what I don't understand, Jack, is the damage to your foot. There's a bone sticking out of the side of your toes. Hope you have good insurance because they're going to require surgery." I didn't say anything. He didn't either. He just kept looking at me. It became obvious that I didn't have a choice. I had to tell him. I kicked the mule back. The emergency room exploded with laughter. I'm sure he knew all along what happened. He just wanted me to say it in front of everyone. "Kicking that mule with tennis shoes on, Jack? Do you really think you taught him a lesson? With their thick skulls and their pain tolerance, I can assure you, you didn't hurt him enough to matter. I'm thinking you better stick to training horses." "Yeah, Dad told me I'm turning into a mule trainer. That my doctor bills are going to be more than what the mules cost me. But like I told him, the mule's smart enough that even though it didn't hurt him much, I bet he'll never kick me again." I was right. He never did. My dad also kept telling me it didn't matter how good a riding mule Jake turned out to be. If I could not lead him, he was worthless. Again, being frustrated, I thought that when I tied Jake to the pickup, maybe it would help him make him lift his feet if we took him out of the muddy pasture onto solid ground. Dad didn't want anything to do with this, saying, "Jack, if we take him out of the pasture, that long-eared mule is liable to drag my truck into the river. He's stronger than all the draft animals I've ever been around." I couldn't help laughing, thinking it funny that Dad started to think this mule was a super animal. I finally convinced him that if we put the truck into four-wheel drive and stayed away from the river, his truck would be safe. When we pulled Jake out on the road, the stubborn mule still locked up all 4 feet, causing 4 black skid marks on the pavement. But it wasn't long before Jake was picking up all his feet and following us around like a little puppy. A few days later, Dad walked up to me and said, "Son, it's hard to believe, but you were right not to give up on this mule. I won't call him Alpo anymore." I know some people reading this is going to think I was being mean to this mule. I also know that horses and mules, just like children, unfortunately, at times, need tough love. I started learning about tough love being applied to horses when I took my daughter Jackie to a barrel racing clinic. The lady who was putting on the clinic was one of the best barrel racers in the nation for years, and that year had taken first place in the Las Vegas rodeo. She said what a lot of people need to hear, better than I can say it. Speaking into a microphone, she asked everyone in the audience, "Raise your hand if you think of your horse as a pet." More than half the people raised their hands. She then said, "If you're not willing to change trying to make your horse a pet, go get your money back and leave." Everyone was quiet. "I don't want the liability of anyone in my clinic thinking like that." Then she said something I will never forget, and this is the exact quote. "If you want a pet, get a poodle dog." Holding her horse by the halter, she explained, "I've made more than $100,000 with these 1,200 pounds of stupidity. But this horse, and any other horse that thinks it's dominant over you, is dangerous. Horses are herd animals, and they're all about establishing a pecking order. The ones that are dominant kick and bite the less dominant." The audience, obviously surprised by what she had said, remained silent. She continued, "It's always mystified me that the same person who knows they need to discipline their children to keep them from misbehaving will not discipline a horse. If you can do a good job raising your children, you should be a good horse trainer." She was not telling people they should not like their horses. She was trying to communicate that people should not be silly enough to think that because the horse likes you, they won't misbehave or hurt you. The horse is safer and will be better behaved if they know you're going to make them mind. I know what she said is true. I also know the barrel racer liked her horse a lot. Like her, I care about my horses and mules, but I expect them to mind. They like me too. A good example of this is when I want my stock to load in my horse trailer, I just pull into my pasture, open the gate of my trailer, and honk my horn. Then all my animals will come to me and run into my trailer. People are always amazed to see I must push the ones I'm not taking out of the trailer, usually more than once. I not only know horses and mules will like you even if they're not treated like a pet, I also know it works to do one of the things all the cowboys have done for years: show them who's boss. I grew up hearing that term, but with the new generation of horse whisperers, I don't hear it anymore. Again, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I've read several books written by these folks and watched several videos. Like most horse people, I'm extremely impressed with what these trainers can do, and I use some of what I have learned from them to break horses. Understand that I do not claim to be as good as a trainer as they are. I just don't think they emphasize making the horse mind like they should. Your life and safety depends on the horse behaving, especially in the back country. I've read several articles that say more people get killed from riding horses than any other sport. I'm proud of the fact that after my mules are broke, no one has been bucked off, bit, kicked, or hurt in any way by one of my mules, including my grandkids, who start riding them at 3 years or 4 years old, and hundreds of inexperienced riders who have ridden the backcountry on my mules. It seems to me, nowadays, horse training is about getting the horse to mind without a fight. Who would argue with that? And why would anyone want to fight with a 1,200-pound mule? And why would anyone want to hurt a horse physically or emotionally? But I know too many times the novice horsemen don't understand that if they don't make the horse mind, they not only ruin all the training they have paid for, but they can sometimes make the horse dangerous. I realize that I am more adamant about a horse behaving than most riders. One reason for this is that it is too dangerous for anyone to enjoy a ride into the backcountry with a horse that misbehaves, especially when you are alone 30 or more miles from the nearest trailhead. I will leave you with 5 training strategies that have helped me the most to stay safe riding mules in the backcountry. Number 1. Before you decide you want to be a mule owner, you need to understand that just because a mule is obedient for an experienced rider or mule trainer doesn't mean they will behave for everyone. Mules are extremely strong-willed and will keep testing you to find out whether you're going to make them mind. They have the reputation of being stubborn because they will fight hard if they don't want to do something, even if they've done it dozens of times before. I don't think of this as being stubborn as much as being strong-willed and wanting to be dominant over you. Similar to them trying to be dominant over other mules in their herd. It's very common for a novice to pay a lot of money for a well-trained mule, and after they get that mule home, the mule acts up, so the owner lets them win. An example of this might be when they are riding with other people and the new owner tries to make the mule go a different direction than the other riders. It's imperative to understand that if you let the mule get his own way because he fights hard enough, all the expensive training the mule had is ruined. It frustrates me that a lot of people selling these well-trained mules don't tell the buyer that at some point the mule is going to fight them. Instead, sometimes they even train the mules to do tricks like lie down or play with a beach ball, which is fun to watch, but useless. The problem with this is that it's deceiving to an inexperienced buyer. Just because the trainer can make the mule lie down doesn't mean that the mule is always going to do everything you ask him to. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that the training put into a mule is not worth anything, because it's worth a lot. I'm just telling you that if you're going to use a mule in the backcountry, you need to be a good enough rider and not only be willing to make them mind, but not be afraid to make them mind, or you probably shouldn't buy a mule. Another thing I don't want you to misunderstand is that because the mule will fight you doesn't necessarily mean they will buck. Something that will help you make them behave is what number 2 on my list is all about. Number 2. When trying to make the mule behave, it helps if you wear spurs. It's a misnomer that using spurs is cruel. Of course it can be, but it doesn't need to be and shouldn't be. A mule doesn't like to be goosed, so usually all you have to do is nudge them to get a response. Besides, it makes it easier to be in control of your animal. Another advantage of wearing spurs is that it frees up both your hands. There is no need to let go of the reins with one hand, then slap the mule on the butt with something when trying to make the mule mind. I promise you, you'll find that at some point you're going to need both hands to make a mule go the direction you want. If you don't hold the reins in both hands and in such a manner that he can't go left or right, there will be times the mule will keep spinning around. You will also find spurs helpful with keeping the animal walking at a fast pace. Number 3. There's nothing that has kept me from getting hurt as much as tying up the hind leg of a mule. If I had known about this trick, Jake wouldn't have broken my ribs when I was doctoring his head. Again, like when using spurs, you need to be careful when tying up the hind leg of an animal. They are extremely vulnerable to getting a rope burn around their hock if you're not careful. Some people use a cotton rope, but they can still get rope burn when using cotton, especially if the rope is only an inch in diameter. I recommend using a hobble or a belly cinch to wrap around their hind foot. The first thing to do when tying up a hind leg is to tie a loop around their neck. I have seen people tie it to the halter, but I believe it's better for the animal to tie a bowline around their neck. The reason for the bowline is that you don't want to use any knot that might slip, which could make it harder for the mule to breathe. After you have tied the bowline and after putting the hobble on the hind foot, pull the rope through the hobble up through the bowline, bringing the hind foot off the ground. You'll find it's better to use a knot that's easy to untie, because if the mule fights, they will severely tighten the knot. The higher the hind foot is off the ground, the more control you will have. There are several things I like about this old mule trick. One being that it's not that uncomfortable for the mule, unless they fight. So naturally, when you tie up a hind leg, it helps them to learn not to fight. Another good thing is if this is done properly, the mule can't win, and they are fighting the rope and not you. Like the old mule trainer told me, taking the hind leg away from the mule enables you to do all kinds of things and stay out of danger doing it. This has been extremely useful for me with training young mules. When doing something new, they might fight. It would usually only take one time for them to learn what I was asking of them wasn't so bad and not fight me about it anymore, such as getting off and on their back for the first time, loading meat on them the first time, giving them worm medicine, giving them shots, or any other doctoring. I would like you to know I've been using this trick for over 30 years and neither myself nor any mule ever got hurt. Number 4. Another important thing to know is something that even people who have had mules for some time don't seem to understand. That is, if a mule has holes in his training, a term used to describe a mule or horse that behaves most of the time but not all the time, such as not wanting to load into a trailer, not wanting to cross the creek, jumping over logs, not wanting to leave other animals, or even something that would seem as unimportant as walking through a mud puddle. They are not really broke, and at some point they're not going to do something that really matters, and they may do things you don't want them to do, such as buck, even if they've never bucked before. Just like the child someone is raising, if it's not that big of an issue at the time, it's easy and a lot less trouble to ignore them not minding. But just like that child, the mule is smart enough to try and take advantage of you, even about something entirely different, because they know you might not make them mind. Number 5, make sure you feed them well when you take them into the back country. It's not unusual in planning the trip to not have quite enough animals. It's also not unusual for people to skimp on the food required for the stock instead of making more trips or taking fewer people. I guess some don't take into consideration that these animals are almost always working way harder than what they're used to, so they need more and better feed instead of less. I've actually seen people at the trailhead take horse feed off the mules and replace it with cases of beer. Besides just being a humane thing to do, there are other benefits of packing enough horse feed for your trip. The stock will like you, and the backcountry trips more, and they will not try and run off as often, if at all. As mentioned before, when I pull into my horse pasture, all my animals run up into my trailer. It's fun for me, but it can be sad if the pack trip is too great a distance for the older ones. So they must be pulled out of the trailer, not just once, but if I'm not watching them, several times. Like me, the older they get, the more they love the land beyond all roads.
This is Peggy Sue. She's over 30 years old. I got her when she was just weaned as a little baby. And when you say sweetheart, that's an understatement for this gal. She's a long ways for the prettiest mule I've ever owned because her head is a little oversized. but her body is beautiful, even after 30 years old. And she's just what you would call an honest mule, and that she's just really well behaved. But I can remember when the kids were small, we just turn her loose and she just run around the yard, and they'd play a little game where she would chase them, and she chased them right into the house more than once. But anyway, I'm going to give her a long overdue haircut. I'm embarrassed that she's gotten this long. Mules, their hair is not as fine as a horse, and and their manes tend to stick straight up, so they don't look near as nice as if you get them trimmed up. She's looking at that fire like she'd never seen one before for some reason. But anyway, you just start cutting, and being the nice little animal she is, she just stands there for me. You can get clippers that works a lot better actually, but I've worn out several of them. These, I just keep buying scissors. I learned a few things from her. One of them is that people have known for a long time that mules are attacked, they get attached to horses. And in the old days, and even I used to use this, is you would have what they called a bell mare. And when you're in the backcountry, one of the biggest issues is not having your animals run off, and you want to be able to let them graze. You don't want to have to pack all your food in or your feed in. So people would actually spend the night watching them instead of sleeping. But if you have a bell mare that just wants to eat all the time and not run off, or just real calm and mellow, you hobble her, and she stays around, and all the mules stay with her. And anyway, I found one of the reasons that happens is because they identify that mare with their mom. And the reason I know that is because when she was, a baby, she wasn't weaned yet, she would try to nurse the other horses, even if it was a gelding. She never did that with any mules. So that's what made me understand that. Well, I should have picked up on it a little sooner, but yeah, that's why they like horses so well. And they'll always stand back, let the horse eat in front of them. So, and the mules you can get just attached to them as you can a dog. And most people will tell you that they're more intelligent than a horse. I agree with that. And the other thing is, they'll tell you if they've been around mules much, is in the backcountry, there's nothing better than a well-broke mule, and there's nothing worse than a bad mule, or a mule that won't behave. One reason is they can kick you in a 360 degrees. I could be standing right up in front of her, and had it happen before, be putting medicine on her head, and they can kick your hand with their hind foot and do it pow so quick you don't even know it's coming, which makes them really, really dangerous if they're not behaved. Now a horse, they can kind of strike at you, but for the most part, they got to turn their hind end towards you. Not a mule. They get that from the donkey. Donkeys are amazing animals. A lot of people don't quite understand that because they're ugly little critters, or can be, but they're way stronger than a horse or even a mule, pound per pound. And they survived in the world by fighting, where a horse, he survived by running away from whatever was after him. That's why they get that. They call it the flight syndrome or whatever. A horse gets in trouble, it'll blow up. They call it blowing up, and it just take off running right through brush and right through a fence. I had to run right through fences before, but a donkey, he stands back there and kicks with his feet and bites, and they're ferocious animals. They'll take most horses, and actually have killed a lot of stallions that people have witnessed. So the mule gets a lot of benefits from the donkey. Looks are not one of them. But this gal's got all straight legs. Some of these donkeys are all curved in. Like I said, she's She was built a little better when she was 20 years younger, but she's still a heck of a pack animal and won't cause anybody any trouble. And I'll always love her. But anyway, that's her haircut.